will be worse till you bring them to life. Words will be worse till you bring them to life. Words will be worse till you bring them to life. Till you bring them to life. I've been too many times on the border. Yeah. Don't bring that bomb to my door again, my friend, you know it. You know I have walked a many times, was down and away. Been there, I've done that. Those words are just sand in my head. So tired. Welcome to the show. This is Let's Catch Up with Mike. I am your host, Mike Vatter, and that was Talk, Talk, Talk by St. Michael featuring Anya Gold. And this is the special Pride edition of Let's Catch Up with Mike. This is obviously Pride Month, and we have a special guest this week, and it is Brannon Hicks, Coach Brannon. He's been on the show before. You may remember him. He was on with his partner, his Padawan, Chris, not too long ago, a few episodes back, talking about their relationship and their business, their coaching business. Brannon, as you may recall, is a retired SWAT officer, police officer, but he is now an MMA fighter and coach, as I mentioned. But Brannon is going to talk about pride and what it means to him and how it kind of fits into his daily life. Brannon, as a retired, or not as a retired, but as a police officer, as a SWAT officer, you were like, this rough and tumble, muscly, not at all the stereotype of queerdom. You're like the tough guy. You're not not to feed into the stereotype, but you're not a pansy. You're not a effeminate at all. You're not at all what the far right likes to paint us as. The light and the loafers kind of old-fashioned stereotype. So
sure.
Growing up in a very conservative area where you didn't know anyone else in what I like to call the queer mafia, the LGBTQIA plus community, and being in a very conservative role as a SWAT officer and a lieutenant in the police force. And you said in our pre-show prep, you said you didn't know anyone else in your town who was gay or in the queer community. So what was that like? How did that shape you in your life now? And kind of talk about that if you don't mind. First of all, welcome to the show. I'm sorry I dove right in. So welcome to the show. No worries. And then please dive right in and tell us all about that.
Okay. Yeah.
I got excited. Yeah, I was glad to have you back and just started talking.
That's all right. You're doing good. I was a patrol sergeant, SWAT assistant team leader. Part of my role in law enforcement as well was I was a defensive tactics instructor. That's, we teach officers how to go hands-on. I was a physical fitness instructor. So that was, the tactical world was kind of where I lived, inside of law enforcement. I grew up in the martial arts, started training when I was very young in Northeast Kentucky, and it was, a very small town. Really nice people, I grew up with, everything was safe, and it was kind of this tiny little spot in the middle of nowhere. But it was really homogenous. There wasn't a lot of ethnic, religious, cultural diversity there, so it was
the other kind of homo.
The other kind of homo, right? So, and sometimes I say, coming out as an atheist was a little bit tougher than coming out, but kind of depends on where you're at. But
yeah.
Growing up in that part of the country, my perception was when I was 12 years old in 1986, my perception was that there was nobody else like me around. I was the only one. I was way too afraid to talk about it. There was a lot of shame involved in the thoughts going around in my head. And I perceived myself to be entirely alone in that situation. Looking back at it, I'm sure statistically that's impossible. Right. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, But at the time, that's how it feels. plus I was involved in martial arts. I was that was so strongly tied to my identity when I was a kid. I would, ready to fight, ready to go. And all of that kind of hyper masculinity was just kind of part of the deal. 86 was the middle of the AIDS crisis, and being in Kentucky and not around really any kind of a diverse culture. All I really knew of gay people, we called queers at the time, and that was kind of the word that was tossed around, not as a compliment or not as just as an identifier, but what I knew of them was what I saw on television. I saw people suffering and dying of AIDS and HIV. I saw that into the crisis. I saw the episode of 21 Jump Street where they dealt with a kid with HIV, and it was scary. And it was, I didn't identify with any of that because I didn't know how to connect to it. Right. I knew that I was thinking about guys and girls at the time, and most of us at that age are thinking about one or the other or both, or, whatever it is that pops into our head. So, I realized I was attracted to both at the time in some ways, and that changed and evolved over time too. But when you think you're the only one, it is so damaging to your psyche. It's so damaging to your mind and your development. And I often say it's kind of like a lost boy syndrome. You don't grow up. There's a significant part of yourself that doesn't mature, that doesn't age, because you're pushing it down in there. You're hiding it. So you don't get to explore those things. You don't get to explore those concepts. It just was a very lonely kind of an existence in that way, and it was a tricky thing to have to learn to repress and suppress. And I spent most of my law enforcement career closeted, pretty much all of it, except for the last year, for the most part. And that culture too is very hyper masculine. It's you got to be tall, strong, you got to be tough, you got to be there, and yeah, a little bit of a challenging environment to stay in the closet in. But big picture, it was something that happened in law enforcement that really kind of propelled me to come out. So I got to be grateful for that. Different times today, but yeah, it was interesting.
So you mentioned the word queer, back then, and I you and I are, I guess, roughly the same age. I always grew up with the word queer being something that was yelled at, from a car as someone threw something at you, from the, as you're walking down the street. But now queer is a term we've taken back. It's like, a lot of people in the Black community have taken the N-word back as something that they've claimed. We've claimed the word queer as our word. And it's a word we claim to kind of encapsulate the entire community as we are the queer community. It's our word now. And it took me a long time to wrap my brain around that, because we don't use, we can call each other, gay men can call each other faggot, or fag, and in a teasing term. But if somebody on the outside, somebody on the outside does it, it's fighting words. So it was kind of like that for a long time. Queer was an inside word, but now it's a word we use, and we use it proudly.
Right.
So it took me a long time to wrap my brain around that, but you mentioned that, and I wanted to address that because a lot of people in the audience may not be comfortable with that word yet. My dad, when I mentioned that, I worked at the queer prom at UNF a couple of years ago, and the company that I work with did the lights and sounds for the queer prom, and my dad said, why on earth would they call it the queer prom? And my dad's very open-minded and very accepting, and he said that's going to set you guys back 100 years calling it the queer prom. And I said, no, that's what the college kids are calling it now. 2 years ago, I was like, why would they call it the queer prom? And so did he, but I was coming around to it. And now it's kind of like, in the news, in the media, and all the TV shows, queer is the word to use. Queer, I mean, even, queer eye for the straight guy, queer as folk, it was still, even then, it was still kind of like, it's still our inside word. Why are we using it publicly? But
why are we saying it to these people?
Don't tell the straights that we call each other that,
Let them know.
Don't.
It's interesting, man.
Who told? Did Dave tell everybody?
You phrased it.
Yeah.
To Dave, was it Carl?
It was Carl.
But
It's
I think
always
you,
either Carl or Dave. They always
it's
tell
always
everybody.
Carl. It's always
Yeah.
Carl. But I think you
So
phrased that perfectly. It's like we've taken ownership of it, and I was
yeah,
just discussing that this morning. It used to be an insult. That's what it was.
yeah,
Those queers, this or that, and it defined, for me, effeminate men. It was,
right.
I hate using those descriptive words, but what
Yeah,
people at
me
the
too.
time would have called effeminate men.
Yeah,
And that's kind of, and they meant that as an insult. Of
right.
course, today I see a man who is perhaps more femme, and there's nothing remotely odd or insulting about that to me at all. It's just how
No.
he is. That's who he is, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, growing up, that was an insult. So when I use it today, and I've learned to use it from, I say the kids, I'm 47, but
Yeah.
but the way younger people have taken that and gone, yeah, that's us, that's ours.
Yeah.
It's almost like bulletproofing ourselves against people using it against us. And I think it's
Yeah.
kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah. When someone says they're femme and they say it proudly, I love that. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. No matter what your label is, own it.
yeah.
To me,
And
that's the thing, is you have to, if you label yourself, own that label. If somebody else
yeah,
labels you, then you've got to decide if that's yours to own or not. But if
yeah.
if you label yourself, own your label.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It disempowers people that want to use it against you in such a big
absolutely.
way.
That's
It
yeah,
really does.
that's the
I
word,
don't know
disempower.
I don't know what kind of language I can use on your show, but a
Oh,
guy.
whatever you want.
Well, okay. Well, a guy one time says, "You're a cocksucking faggot." I'm like, "Yep, you got me."
Yeah, yeah,
He just stands there looking at me like an idiot, like, "Oh my god, what do I do now?" And
yeah,
I'm just like, "Yeah, got me."
yeah,
What else? What's next?
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just
I
one of those
mean,
empowering things.
yeah, you take the wind out of their sails. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned when we were talking before, you mentioned how your sense of pride has been
Yeah.
instilled in your children.
Yes.
And
So
I want you to talk about that, because I think that's really important for people in our audience to hear. People who are either
right.
the parents, the queer parents of children
Sure.
who are coming of age, or the queer children who need to come out to their parents. I think that's really important for people to hear.
Right. And I talk about my family in general terms because I think it's important to let them speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to speak about those things in general terms, but I'll say that I grew up believing this was not true, but I grew up believing that if I came out to my parents, they would be so disappointed in me and that they would hate me. I thought my dad would kill me. My dad ends up expressing the opinions. Thank God I know I can say F-bombs now. He's like, it's really fucked up when somebody's kid comes out to them and they decide they can't love that kid anymore. He says that person is fucked up.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that at the time. It was entirely my belief that my parents would look at me in a certain way. But what I know for sure is, my kids, if they are straight, gay, bi, trans, whatever, I don't give a shit. If they are happy and healthy, that's what I care about. And in the big picture, they understand that they can tell me whatever they need to. They trust me. They've come to me with questions about my sexuality, about theirs. We're very comfortable talking about it. And I really appreciate that we have that kind of a relationship, where they know that, we don't have to be like everybody else. If we're a minority, that's completely fine. Abnormal isn't wrong. We attach these words, norm. This isn't the norm. And if it's not the norm, it must be bad. That's a statistical description.
Right.
We're not the norm. Okay, fine. We don't fit the statistical normative. That doesn't mean we're bad. It doesn't mean it's wrong. They understand that perspective. They understand that they're free to talk about it. And my God, thank God that they grow up in a culture where it's visible and they can be comfortable enough to know it's not just them and they're not alone.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You mentioned being a minority, and I'm gonna tread lightly here, because I speak from a place of white privilege. I know that, and I always have to tread lightly when I mention this on my show, because I have covered racial issues on my show before.
Right.
And right now is a time when there's a lot of Asian backlash going on.
Yeah.
You are half Asian, correct?
Well, I'm actually part native. That's why I have the slanted eyeballs. So,
Okay.
yeah, a lot of other ethnic group get the epicanthic folds, and I got one of those holdovers. But
Okay.
Christopher is Asian American Pacific Islander. He's Filipino,
Okay.
and we haven't had to deal with anything like that directly, but I see it emerging. And whew, man, in a recent issue, not to get into politics, but there's Chris Ching is a very accomplished competition shooter, and he was
Yeah, I saw
recently on the
your
cover.
article on him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the cover of Recoil magazine, and man, some of the responses in the comments in response to him just being on the cover.
Yeah.
When I know a lot of people will disagree with his position, but he's a 2A advocate. He's very well trained, very well educated. And the backlash just from him existing on the cover in that magazine was pretty gnarly, and it's keeps in mind, that people often say they love freedom, but they mean that when your freedom looks like their freedom, they love it.
Right.
But if it looks different, they don't so much love it.
Yeah.
And part of the reason he was on there, we've had that rise in violence against Asian Americans in particular since the spread of COVID and all that mess that kind of got tossed around with the China virus BS and all that.
Well, I don't want to get into the Second Amendment debate, because that's something I think you and I don't necessarily agree on, and that's a whole different discussion from Pride. But sure. I did want to talk a little bit about the Asian American Pacific Islander backlash that's happening now, because I know Chris, your partner being Asian American, and you being kind of perceived as being Asian American, and having that background of martial arts, and people putting you in that box, having to deal with that world, and gay bashing, which is still a thing. But anyone who crosses you is an idiot, because I mean, first of all, they can look at you and see you could kick their ass, but I'm sure people still try. But you said you haven't had to deal with the Asian bashing, for lack of a better word, so much. But when someone does come at you for whatever reason, I know you're well equipped physically to deal with that, but that's obviously a last resort for you.
Right.
How have you instilled in your children to deal with that, because they carry some of the physical traits? You mentioned you mentioned the slanted eyes, so I'm going to use that as the example. But you do have Asian characteristics, and so do your children. So when that does come up, or you mentioned, and I'm going to let you tell that story, but you mentioned one of your children recently expressing a sexual orientation story to you, and I do want you to touch on that. But when your children are bullied, or someone comes at them, how have you taught them to disarm that before it becomes physical? Because I know this sense of pride that you have, that you carry, is beyond the gay pride. You have a sense of pride that you carry with you. You're one of those people that I look up to, in a sense of being able to, I don't want to say mix, because that's not the right word, and you don't code switch, but you mix well with people of all walks of life. You're more conservative than I am politically, but you're also a very liberal, open-minded person in many ways. And you mix well with other groups. I'm going to say the word mix because I can't think of another word, but you mix with a lot of different groups because of your law enforcement background, because of your conservative upbringing, because of a lot of things. You do mingle well with, I'm gonna say mingle. You mingle well, or as the Yiddish term that I kind of made up is schmingle. you schmooze and mingle well with other groups. You schmingle well.
I love that word. That's fantastic.
I made it up a few years ago, and I kind of I've stuck with it. But you schmingle well with other people. You can use it, by the way, if you want. But you schmooze and you mingle well. Right. So you do it with aplomb. You don't fake your way into a group. You're just yourself. No. And I feel like I do that too, but there are very conservative groups that you mix with that I can't, because I'm too wrapped up in my beliefs, but you do it very well. And I know that can cause confrontations that you would rather not have. Sure. I know you well enough to know you'd rather not have those confrontations, but I want to know how you do.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So touching on the kids part of that first, and then
Yeah.
kind of talking about how I bridge between these communities or schmingle between these communities. So my kids, when it comes to bullying of any type, uh, they know, and they have the advantage of self-defense training from a very early age, so that they kind of get a sense of physical confidence. But
That photo of your son, by the way, sparring with you,
yeah,
what is he, like 5 in that picture? I think he's going to
he
kick your
was.
ass.
Oh my gosh, I think he was like 8 at the time, and that kid's gonna be so tall. And his mama's family is tall. They're beautiful, big, strong people. But my people are short. We don't do that sort of thing. So
Right.
but yeah,
You're kind
I
of a
think he's.
shrimp. You're shorter than I am. You're kind of a shrimp.
I'm 5'7". Yeah, I mean, I fit conveniently into overhead carriage bins and everything else. It's great, but I have really instilled in them that whenever somebody is attempting to bully them, it's important that they confront it right away. But it's important that they know that a confrontation doesn't mean a fight.
Right.
They have to have the intellect, they have to have the articulation, the eloquence to be able to express themselves when they're angry, and have to learn how to manage those emotions, and they have to confront it right away. Um, Often what they end up doing is helping somebody reveal how ignorant their position is when when they start doing these things, and that's kind of what I've tried to give them. Um, that's a lot of teaching kids how to communicate through example. That's a lot of learning how to communicate and manage your emotions while you're communicating. So that can be tricky, but I think it is really important that as soon as we see that kind of bullying, that kind of oppressive behavior, we encounter it, and we counter it right away. That, I believe, dissuades that person from continuing that behavior, at least toward the individual that they're targeting. So important that they learn to do that. Self-defense for us, the physical part of that, and they know this from the onset, is the dead last thing we should ever do. It's if we are physically defending ourselves, then either we didn't have an opportunity to do something before it, or everything that we've done to try to avoid it has failed.
Right.
If we see a dangerous situation coming, we should avoid it. If we can't avoid it, we should run away from it. If we can't run away from it, we got nothing left. Yeah. But that should be dead last on our list of options. We're better than that. We should learn to communicate with each other in a civil way. And yeah, I think it's very important that we do that and learn to confront those things quickly. So bridging between those communities, that's a good topic. It's an interesting topic. One of the advantages that I have is that, how do I put this? When I go into a firearms training course, for example, when I go teach it, I don't talk politics because I don't need to. We're just there to train. But I pretty much always make sure that I wear a pride shirt or something else themed, or like the little flag on my hat, something at some point, to, hey, here I am. We don't discuss it, we don't bring it up, but it will always kind of make the rounds, and people go, ah. But one of the advantages that I have is a high degree of ability and capability.
Right.
So they see that I can do these things, and they can't really assail that. That they can't attack what I can do. And once they go, yeah, but he can do this, then it becomes the non-issue that it should be.
Right.
And I think it starts to open up a lot of doors, and we start to find some ways to ally with people that we wouldn't find otherwise. And same deal. I go into our LGBT spaces, and I've taught self-defense courses, everything else, and I don't talk politics because we don't need to. We're all good.
Oh, you froze. Hopefully you'll come back. Oh no. Well, we're going to wait a second. Looks like his signal dropped. Well, this is what happens when we record live. Looks like Brandon's signal froze. He is in his car, obviously, and I don't know what happened, but he's piggybacking off Wi-Fi. So we're gonna wait for him to come back, and hopefully, hopefully his signal will come back and he will rejoin us. But yeah, so what Brandon was sharing was that when he goes into these queer spaces and does self-defense classes. I actually took one of his classes at the Metro, which is a nightclub here in Jacksonville. It's an entertainment complex. And I took my husband and my niece with me to do one of these trainings. It was right after the Pulse shooting. And he was teaching a course on self-defense if there was an active shooter. And by the way, just an aside, an FYI, Congress just recently voted to make Pulse a national memorial, which I think is very cool. So thank you to Congress for doing that, and the Biden administration for putting that forward. But my niece and my husband and I went to the training that Brannon did at Metro Entertainment Complex shortly after the Pulse shooting. And we took his training class, and it was interesting because he mentioned his he's trying to contact me. Well, hopefully he will be back in a second. He's texting me. His phone lost signal, so I'm going to just kind of pick up where he is, see if he can come back. Please do. Yep, he's going to try and come back in. So anyway, in the middle of the training, he just kind of casually off the cuff mentioned his boyfriend, and my niece was like, "What? Oh, I didn't expect that." And it was very cool because he just kind of casually slipped that in, that, he has a boyfriend, or had at some point had a boyfriend. And it was just kind of neat because, like he said, he's always got that visibility about him. She didn't know him prior to that training. So it's neat that he does keep his visibility without wearing his heart on his sleeve, so to speak. So I see Brandon's trying to connect now. So let's get him back in here. And there he is joining us. So, okay. I just kept talking while we were waiting for you. So
cool.
I was talking about the training that you did at Metro that my husband and niece and I came to, and I just kind of talked
cool.
about that. So you were in the middle of talking about how you do trainings, and
Right.
how you kind of give subtle nods to being queer, but not wearing your heart on your sleeve kind of thing. So I just kind of picked up where you left off there. Unless you have anything to add, I wanted you to get on that topic. I wanted you to get back to the story you shared about your daughter in the pre-show, if you want to talk about that, but you don't have to.
Right. Yeah. No, she I think she's comfortable with me talking about this, but
Okay.
she came out as bisexual to her mom and to I, and we're of course fine. We're good. We're set.
That's awesome.
But she was so comfortable in doing that, and that sparked an interesting conversation between her and I, where she's like, I see all this pride stuff. It's kind of annoying. It's like a Target. It's everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God this stuff is out there, because this wouldn't have been out there when I was a kid, when I was her age. And she's like, why is all this stuff out here? It's kind of a consequence of our success. People have done so much work to reach this level where we can be out and proud and be visible, that younger people are now like, why are we doing this? It's
Right.
unfortunate in a way, because they don't know what went into that, all the struggle that went behind that. But it's gotten to that point, I think, where it's like, man, it's so easy to come out now for some people. I know for some people it's a real struggle, but for some of us, it's so easy and it's so visible and it's so open. They're asking the question, why do we still need pride? And sparked an interesting conversation there between her and I.
Yeah, that's great, and that's congratulations to her. So pass that along, please. And that is an interesting point. In some areas of the country, as you know, there are still cities where you can be arrested for indecent exposure or disrupting the peace just for holding the hand of the person you love. In many states, you can still be fired just for being gay. That's why we still fight for equal rights. That's why we still have pride parades. And pride parades, that can be argued, we need corporate dollars in order to fund the parades, but do we want corporate floats, with their banners and logos all over the place? Sure. It's a catch-22.
It is.
But, we need the money to put on the parade, but then
Yep.
with the money comes the corporate logos, and then it's no longer a pride parade the way it was supposed to be. Originally it was a riot. Originally
Right.
it was a fight to get our rights, and
Right, man. Yeah.
now it's a celebration. But
Yeah.
there's room for both, I think, depending on your standpoint. But the goal should be that eventually we're all annoyed to see rainbow flags at Target and rainbow flags,
Right.
and the goal should be that even the most conservative store, big box chain store, has something for Pride Month. The goal
Right.
should be that it's as common as seeing an American flag at Walmart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That should be the
It is.
goal. I mean,
It should be.
it should be that annoying, but it's not, and that's why we keep fighting.
Right.
I want to ask you, and this may be a difficult question for you to answer. And I have my opinion, and I'm happy to give it. I don't know that you want it, but how do you feel about cops at Pride?
Oh, shoot, man. That's such a mixed history, and not that the two things equate, but one of the things I learned early on, and I'll have to say, there's only 2 times I've had complete strangers look at me like they want to kill me. And that was one, when I was holding another man's hand in public, and 2, when I went into some neighborhoods in a police uniform. And they didn't know that I had the best of intentions, right? But why didn't they know that? They didn't know that because law enforcement was the branch of the government that was used to subjugate, to control, to punish, to imprison them for so long. Why would they know that? Of course, it's culturally ingrained that police are dangerous for some of us. It's pretty much like that with the queer community, the LGBTQIA community. So I get why there's heat, and the reality is, yeah, are there queer cops? Sure. Yeah, quite a few, operating at all levels. Are they trying to make changes? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, so I get why there's heat. At some point, we've got to start bridging that. I can't help but think, kind of like as we integrated the military first and law enforcement communities later, and then every other branch racially, at some point, we've got to start making that bridge. How do we do that? Oh man, I know that's sticky. I know there's hard feelings, and I know they're justified. And I completely get why people have heat having cops in general at events where they would have been imprisoning people, just a few decades ago. So I understand that. But at some point, we've got to start making a bridge. I would love to see more queer people out in law enforcement. I would love to see them in more positions of power where we can really start kind of really bridging that, and not just talking about how important it is to bridge it. So I get why people are uncomfortable with it, and a lot of times people in the law enforcement community get their feathers ruffled by that. But I'm like, look, and I know too, at times when they put up off duty for that, people wouldn't fill it, and I've heard cops, talk sideways, about people in the LGBT community. I've confronted what I've heard it, but yeah, there's a lot of heat out there, and it's certainly understandable and justifiable.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I really do. I really feel like, there are people who say, cops should not be allowed at Pride in any capacity at all.
Right.
And my feeling is that it's discriminatory and goes against our inclusiveness of Pride if you say a police officer can't come to Pride and celebrate if they're off duty and out of uniform.
Sure.
I mean, so that's like saying doctors can't come to Pride, or
Right.
Starbucks baristas can't come to Pride, or
Right.
you work at Hobby Lobby and you're queer, you can't come to Pride because you work for the enemy. You work at Chick-fil-A, you can't come to Pride. I mean, if you're queer and you want to come to Pride, you should come to Pride.
Yeah.
That's so gay Republicans can't come to Pride.
Right.
If you're there in the official capacity of the enemy, in uniform representing the quote bad guys, I get it. Don't come in uniform. Don't come on duty. I get that. But if you're coming as an individual separate from that organization, off duty, off the clock, I say you're welcome. Come.
Yeah.
But then the other side of that is, if we're in an area where it's not safe for the parade to progress, from one part of the street to another, from one part of the town to another, where you need police officers to close the roads.
Right.
Jacksonville doesn't allow private security to close the streets.
Right.
Jacksonville doesn't allow private security to close the bridges. Jacksonville doesn't allow private security to do a lot of things you have to hire police officers to do. So, and the state of Florida now has a law that if someone's blocking the road, you can run them over. So do we allow, which is ridiculous. So,
it's insane.
So what do? Do we block the roads and get run over to prove a point? So we can celebrate Pride, or do we hire police officers who are even off duty and make sure they're gay, or is that discriminatory? There's a lot of catch-22s going on. So, I don't know what the easy answer is. There's not an easy answer.
It's tough, man. There's the old saying, we don't make peace with our friends and allies. We make peace with our enemies. And, I don't think that's ever been a comfortable process anywhere in history, or, necessarily had the happiest of beginnings anywhere in history, but how do we do it?
Yeah.
But I get where the discomfort comes from. I get where the dislike comes from. And, I do my best, because I am able to bridge between a lot of these communities to represent the interests as I see them, but to make sure that they know I'm not speaking for any community as a whole. No one person can do that.
Yeah.
But I try to represent, no, we can't, I try to represent my ideas as best I can. And you touched on this earlier, going back to stereotypes, when people look at me, and I've gotten this from the LGBTQI community and from the community at large, they don't see a gay dude. They don't see a dude that likes other dudes, because I don't fit the stereotype that they have in their head.
Right.
So because I don't fit that stereotype, I'm able to bridge in different ways. I'm able to kind of get my foot in the door. And once they know that, oh, hey, he's a normal, level-headed, decent person, he's not going to try to throw anything nuts at us, and I don't try to convince anyone of anything. I just try to, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. Look at it. If you like it, let's talk about what you like. If you don't like it, let's talk about what you don't like. I know how to disagree with people civilly. I know how to have those discussions, and I know how to change my mind when it's presented to me in a way that makes me believe I should change my mind.
Yeah. I have no response to that, because it's a great answer. So I'm going to leave that at that. So I do want to promote your fitness business a little bit, because I do think it's important that people who have listened to today, and maybe will go back and see your previous episode with me, that they say, oh, this guy does fitness, this guy does, training. I want to know more. So maybe they'll go back and watch the other episode. Tell them how they can get a hold of you, how they can find your personal training, and how they can reach out to you, and where they can find you, and how they can get some Coach Brannon in their lives.
Sure. My Facebook right now is Brannon Athletics. Same on Instagram, it's Coach_Brannon. My website is being built right now. It'll be brannon-athletics.com. Mostly what I do now is sports nutrition. I work with people on losing body fat, gaining muscle mass, maximizing their performance in sports. Do remote personal training as well. And I do in-person self-defense training. I do most of that one-on-one or small groups. The reason I think this is so important is, I've had a lot of mental health struggles with PTSD, with depression, with anxiety. 3 parts to that, right? Mind, body, and spirit. Your mind has to be set. You have to be educated. You have to learn. Your body has to be healthy, and your spirit has to be fulfilled in whatever way you do that. And I'm not a religious person. I'm an atheist, as I'm sure I mentioned before. And that can be a tough boat to row, growing up in the parts of the country that I've grown up in. But we have to have all 3 of those things set. And I know that if I didn't have my body set, if I weren't paying attention to my fitness, if I weren't eating clean fuel, if I weren't outside getting enough sunlight, that spirit and mind would suffer as well. So I think we need to work on all 3 of those things as much as we can, and kind of include them in one package.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate you being on the show again. Anything you want to add as far as Pride goes, or? Pride
is just such a big deal to me. It's super important. I'll be at the parade when we have it. I'll take my kids, whatever else it is. I think it's just really important that we be visible, that we get out there. And what I tell people all the time, I hear folks I know and like say, you know, I'm tired of this being shoved down my throat. Is it though? You know, don't go to the pride parade. You know, don't watch the show with a gay character in it because nobody's going to make you do this. But what I think is critically important, I know there is a closeted kid somewhere who thinks he's the only one in the world, and there's nobody else like him, and he's going to be alone forever. It is super important that that kid sees this, that kid knows that they can come out. There's somebody they can go to. Man, I hope we never stop doing that. Pride's a big deal.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will end on that note. Thank you so much, Brannon, for joining me and for for dealing with your connection issues and coming back. I appreciate that.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, I didn't mind vamping for a minute while you were looking for that connection. I was like, maybe he'll come back. If not, I'm just gonna keep talking. But I
will.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And thank you again. I'm going to close the show with our theme song, Talk, Talk, Talk by St. Michael featuring Anya Gold. Thank you, Brannon, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And
thanks, buddy.
Yeah, have a good one. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Too many times on the border, how do you break up with your friend? I know there's no use to confront her, but how do you say this is the end? I'm through being taken for granted. The one you call nobody's wrong.